Hey everyone, welcome to the moon forecast for the full moon we have coming up in Aquarius. I'm Kendall with the Bohemian Tarot Girl. Amy,
And I'm Amy with Wild Reawakening, and we are back for the full moon forecast.
it's
This
a
is a
really
big, important, highly transformative, full of upheaval situation that we have going on here.
I completely agree. When I looked at all of the things happening in and around this full moon, I was like, oh man, this is going to be big. There's going to be some big changes, in the outside world, as well as the potential for big changes in our lives as well. So, yeah.
Yes. So we have a lot to get into, but first off, this is happening August 19th, 2024 at 11:26 a.m. Pacific time. So you can go ahead and adjust that for wherever you are in the world. And it's happening at 27 degrees of Aquarius. If you're new to our channel and you haven't been following full moon energy very long, full moons happen when the moon is in exact opposition to where the sun is. So we have our sun in Leo and the moon is in Aquarius. And that creates kind of an energy of some kind of opposing polar opposite situations, but they also kind of come together and resonate in a way that also complements each other. So it's kind of about finding middle ground between the two. And then if you're using moon energy as a way to kind of work with the energies, full moons is typically when we look at what we can release, what we no longer want to bring with us, is no longer serving us, what's outdated, and go ahead and start letting go of those things so that we can move on to what is more in alignment for us in the future. So,
And this moon is a super moon. So if you're out looking at it, it's going to be closer and bigger and a little bit brighter. It's pretty cool if you haven't checked that out before. The one that's actually going to be the closest is going to be the October full moon. So just be aware that we'll see a couple of those happen.
yeah. So, oh gosh, where to even start with this? One of the things to take note with this moon is that it's not just about the moon. I mean, moon energy lasts 3 days. It does kind of end and begin cycles that last longer. So it can be a cycle that starts at this full moon and goes until the new moon, or it can be a longer cycle that goes from this full moon to the next full moon, or even, until we have, 6 months from now when we have the full moon in Leo that is in the sign of Aquarius. So it does start cycles and patterns that are important, even though the moon energy does not last very long. But
And this one's a big one with cycles of change.
yes,
Let me
this
just say
moon
that.
is not just about the moon. And so we're going to talk about some of this other energy that's coming in. So much of what's happening around this moon involves, well, it involves every single planet is involved in this moon, and the way that they are aspecting each other, how they're coming together in the zodiac to create patterns, has some really significant, fated, important transits happening that are definitely going to affect us on a collective level, but also on a personal level. And so just be aware as we're going through the energies in the next couple of weeks with this, that people around you are experiencing the same intensity that you are. And we always kind of do this as a reminder, is to not take things personally, have a little bit of grace for yourself and other people. Communication can be a little bit weird. You may not be getting all the information that you need, and that is due to Mercury being in retrograde still until the end of the month. It's like the 28th or something
Yep.
is when Mercury ends its retrograde period. And so Mercury, being the planet of communication and transportation and technology, and information received and how it is expressed, with it being in retrograde, it causes delays, it causes miscommunications, it causes disruptions in the normal flow of all of those things. So just be really kind of aware of how you are communicating with people, and also have a little bit of grace. So sorry. It's like always happens as soon as we start recording, we get thunder and lightning going on here. But have a little bit of grace and discernment with the communication that you're receiving from other people, because it may come across in ways that it's not meant, and you may not have all the pieces to the puzzle. So just a little warning, disclaimer there to start off with, because that Mercury is also conjunct the sun right now. So it has like an extra boost of energy from the sun that is going to
Yeah.
give it some significance.
Let's talk about the heavy hitters. So
Oh.
the two T squares I want to talk about first, I feel like. So let's talk about the moon, the sun in Leo, and the Uranus Taurus square that is happening. Um, and this is really a cycle that is happening that really is going to bring in some big shifts and changes. And with it, it's going to be a little bit edgy. How are you how are you feeling about this?
Oh boy. Yeah. So just to explain a T square really quick.
Good point.
Um, we have the wheel, at 360 degrees, it has 12 planets. So each planet has 30 degrees, or each sign has 30 degrees. And so when you divide that and you make a cross section and you create, right angles, that is what we call a square. And so the planets that square each other typically have the same, would you call it an energy? Or these are all the fixed signs.
Yes.
So Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, and Scorpio are what we consider to be fixed signs. And those tend to be signs that don't typically budge a whole lot on their, they have very specific ways of doing things, of thinking of things. There's not a lot of change that happens within those signs and how they operate. So we have this T square, which is happening because the sun and the moon and Mercury, well, the sun and Mercury are in Leo, and then the moon is opposite that, which creates 180 degrees. And that moon is in Leo. And then, so it goes like this. And then we have Uranus coming in and making like a perfect T square to the situation. Yeah. And Uranus, this is the one that's kind of coming in and causing all the drama.
Really?
Because Uranus is about sudden upheaval, it's about change, it's about the unexpected and the things you don't see coming, and it's coming in to shake things up in ways that you could not have predicted, could not have anticipated, and are probably not ready for and don't see coming. So
There might be some of you out there that know what's going to go on, but that's not the majority of people. I think the majority of people are totally just, it's going to be a big shocker to them. And I think it's going to be really reflected in our outside world. And then there's potential for that huge shift in your internal world too. I think if you've been focusing and you're really tuned into what's going on, then you already are seeing the action of the shift that's happened. You know what I mean? Like, and I use the example of what I'm doing currently. I'm in the process of moving. I've had already started this, and I just know this big shift is coming to completion during this time. So I'm aware of it. There's going to be other things, I'm sure, that are going to going to happen during this time. But that is a huge life shift for me. So,
yeah, and some people, you have a kind of a vision. Some people are more visionary than others, and they have a vision and a direction that they're going in. And not to say that your visions or directions are going to be railroaded, because that's not necessarily it. But sometimes you can have the best laid plan and something's going to come in and shift that plan. And the more that you can be flexible and open to the shifting that is occurring during this time, the easier overall it can be. Because this energy does not have, some people will look at this and be like, oh no, this is a terrible energy. And some people will look at this and be like, yeehaw, let's go.
Mhm.
Like, there's not a negative or a positive to it. It's just an energy. And so, really, what defines that is how you respond and react to the shifts and changes. Are you adaptable? Are you open to exploring new opportunities? Do you have the ability to kind of like pivot your direction a little bit and make a new plan based on new information or opportunities or situations arising in your life? The people who are going to have the hardest time right now are those who only see one path forward.
Yep.
So, really, this is up to you.
It's really that tower card and how you interpret it, right? In tarot, there's a tower card, and that can mean sudden upheaval and change, within your life or whatever your energy you're looking at. And for me, I always think, oh, the tower card's going to come in and it's going to shift things up for me and it's going to open some new doors and it's going to bring me to a new place. So I kind of look at it in the light of it's good, and there is some usually uncomfortableness to it, but it brings in good change in your life. So it's just, like you said, it's your perspective of how you look at things. Are you okay with the change? Are you not okay with the change? Are you willing to roll with whatever situation, comes about? Who knows? I'm gonna, move, and maybe there's a reason why I moved, and where I'm at is not the end all be all, and it's just getting me to the right place at the right time at the right moment. So, yeah.
It's really good right now to have a lot of trust in the universe's flow
Yep.
and the direction it wants to move you. Um, we may not have a say, and also, this, like we said, it's not just personal; it's also collective. We may be seeing this play out in certain aspects across the world stage in ways that feel um, like shock and awe or disaster doom. I mean, it's really how are you going to view it? And collective energy is interesting because if you work with energy, which is something that I pay a lot of attention to, when you have a lot of people focusing their energy in one direction, it tends to shift things in that direction. So the more people that can get on board with like looking at the best possible outcome for things, that changes the energy and vibration of what is happening on a global level. So don't get too caught up in the drama of what's happening. Don't think doom and gloom. Don't think worst case scenario. Life is duality. It can go either way, but how are you going to play? What part are you going to play, and how are you going? What are you going to focus on, and how it plays out? So,
So interesting.
it really is. But that moon opposing Mercury at this time too, in the midst of this T square, moon is about your emotions. It's
Yep.
your emotional landscape. And with the moon being in Aquarius, there is a big emphasis on community and collective and looking at big picture and future oriented stuff, and really your unique aspects of what makes you you, and how you show up in the world. But with it being that emotional landscape too, it can really, uh, with, opposing that Mercury that's in retrograde that wants to cause all these
Well, and it's kind of interesting.
confusions.
It's interesting because this Mercury retrograde, it actually is like right, with the moon, it's right at the start of the new cycle for the Mercury retrograde, or for the Mercury cycle, right? And that goes all the way to December 5th, this new cycle. And so it's interesting, we've shifted from it being in retrograde in Virgo, it's gone into Leo. And then it's going to be coming out on that 28th. So right after that full moon. And it's going to just start this new space of time. And I was really trying to figure out how is that playing in my life and why is that so important? And there's really a big tie with that Mercury energy with all this kind of fresh starts and new beginnings. So I would definitely s- think about the themes that have come up during this Mercury retrograde for you. Think about what has been changing, what blocks have come up, because those are really you're needing to close some things out, and then you're gonna know, I think, as we move towards this end space, with the full moon, that's gonna play out some themes that are gonna be coming up for you, throughout this next cycle. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, for sure. But don't be surprised. I don't know, Moon and Mercury together.
I know.
um, but don't be surprised if there are things that are coming up that feel really triggering at this moment, and just try not to react on them. The more you react, it's one of those things. It's like when you react, you almost create a bigger problem than what the initial problem was. So just watch your reactions, take some time out to really let things process and make sure that you have all the information. Uh, and see later on, like, it's just a good time to kind of take a step back and try and be more of an observer instead of a speaking your truth. And because your truth may be a little bit skewed by your own lens at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about Jupiter and
Okay.
Saturn. Are you okay with Jupiter and Saturn?
Oh yeah, go, yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
because I wanted to talk about its connection because we've been talking a lot about cycles back to 2020. And so this is really, there was what they considered like a great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, and it was at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And that happened back in 2020. And it was paired with this energy with Pluto, right? And so it's really this time where this was like the seeds of change that was planted. And so if you go back and you journaled and you did some of the work back then, you might be able to recognize what you were trying to manifest during that time and seeing what's being brought into fruition right now, which is the interesting part with this energy. And so this Jupiter and Saturn is the first of 3 squares that are happening. And this one ties all the way back to that 2020 energy and what you were focusing in on that time. And that's really those seeds, like I said, of change that you put into your life during that time, that new visions that you're trying to bring in. And then the second one, just so you know the timeline for this. So this one's the first one. Second one is going to happen on December 24th. And then the third is going to be June of 25. So just know that, this is like your first bump, then you're gonna get a second, and then the final is gonna come in June of 2025. So, do you
I,
remember?
I'm trying, gosh, that feels like a lifetime ago. And it's almost like I have amnesia over that period of time, selective amnesia. Oh, but yeah, I'm not even exactly sure. I know my whole life has changed since then. So, and probably for a lot of other people too, it's like, and then maybe that's part of the selective amnesia is that it doesn't even feel like the same. I don't feel like the same person. That doesn't feel like the same life. Like we are already in deep transformation from where we were from at that time. Um, Gosh, and I think so much of the energy over the last couple of years has been such transformative, up leveling, like rearranging energy to get you from point A to point B. And
And that, I mean, that really is kind of the energy. It's right. It's kind of this, if we looked at it back in 2020, it was kind of this, uh, it was almost like a crisis transition. And so that was the energy it was focusing on was kind of this automatic push. And so we might see seeds of that. I'm hoping that because we're not at the beginning of the cycle, it's going to be less shocking as we move through the cycles of it. But it's interesting that it's really coming back now, and it's coming back with like a three-tiered system. And here we are at the very beginning of it. And so, sometimes with the energy, when we first start out, there can be that initial shock, and then we just kind of see some growth and patterns that are moving us towards a transition. So just know that there's a transition being pushed with this energy. Um, and that checking in with what was really going on in that 2020 span of your life and how things transition for you in your life. Um, Pay attention to that and pay attention to, who you were back then and who you are now and where you are and what you're doing, and see if there was some themes playing out in your life, because I think that's going to give you a little bit of some understanding to where potentially things are going to be changing and coming into play again with this. Because I do feel like this can be some pretty shocking energy if you're not really aware of it. So
Yeah.
I
And
don't want to
those
sneak up on
two
you.
planets, I mean, Saturn and Jupiter, Saturn and Pisces, Jupiter and Gemini is part of the other T square. So it is even like having a more concentrated energetic effect right now, because we also have Gemini or Mars and Gemini. So Mars and Jupiter are very close in conjunction. So Mars being action oriented and kind of volatile at some points, is meeting up with Jupiter, which is all about expanding everything that it comes in contact with. And so there can be a big push to move forward with that. It can also be a little heated, especially in Gemini, which is an air sign, but ruled by Mercury, which is retrograde right now. So you can see how all of these different planets kind of communicate and have energies with each other. But that T square is happening because of Saturn also being opposing Venus, which is in Virgo. So, oh, these are the mutable signs, which are a little bit more, what would you consider mutable to be?
I feel like they're a little bit of the soul is how I tend to look at it. It's more of like a soul level change. Like when I think about the energy being applied, that is how I think of it, more of the soul level, whereas it's more the physical, right? When we're talking about them. And so I really think it's more just really that soul connection to us. That's my personal opinion, but
But because there's kind of like this weird, I don't know, this, like you said, like a bump in the road, it
yeah.
can feel like you're a little bit stuck. It's putting that pressure on Mars, which wants to move, and yet it's having this restriction from Saturn. And then it's having this kind of conversation with Venus, which is just wants to do fun stuff. Um, Venus is all the feel good stuff. And so it's like this lack of ability to focus and lack of concentration and not knowing the direction to move next. And I think a lot of people beat themselves up for that, because we're such a, you need to have a plan and you need to do and you need to execute. But really, just for this time, it's good to just let pieces settle, let the path unfold, let things come together so that you have a more clear idea of what that's going to be. And also know this energy right here. If there's things that fall apart or things that feel disappointing, or like say you're trying to get a job and you're really set on this one job and you get news that you're not going to get it, or that it went to somebody else, or it's not available anymore, that can feel like a huge setback. But just know that any setbacks that are coming right now are actually opening up doors to something that's going to have a lot more stability for you in the future. So it's okay at this time if you're not actively like pushing forward in a certain direction, because with all of this energy that's so erratic and in upheaval at the moment, that's probably not a solid path to follow anyway. So
So I looked at my notes to figure out, what I was kind of going for there. So that first T square that I was talking about, I really focused on the shifts. You're going to see huge shifts in your life in the physical realm, is how I would describe it. And then with this T square that we're talking about, where we have Venus coming into play, this is the one where I feel like it's going to merge all the versions of yourself from all the different worlds, your thoughts, your desires, and kind of bring it into uniting yourself. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a shakeup energy and you're going to feel a bit unsettled. But it's really going to help align you a lot better um, at a soul level, is how I would describe it. So,
makes sense. I feel like I just had this vision as we were talking about this of like this multi-level layer cake.
mhm. Just like,
We have this layer and then we have this layer and somehow it's all going to come together. And then we have like this cherry on top of this multi-layered cake here, which is an unusual aspect, which they call a yod or a finger of God. Um, and this is bringing in those other planets that we haven't talked about yet because they all want to be a part of this big mess of a cake. So we have the sun in Leo, which is kind of like at the apex here. And then a yod or a finger of God kind of like creates an isosceles triangle down to two planets that are in these points, making it like a very perfect isosceles triangle, right? So this is being created with Neptune and Pluto. And those are the outer lying planets. So they're more collective planets, they're long-term energies. Neptune is all about your spirituality, about your intuition, your soul gifts, your soul level aspects of who you are and how you connect to spirit and your higher realms. Pluto is all about transformation, life, death cycles, rebirth, the shifting of things. And so we have, and this aspect is considered something to be highly fated. So we have this element where you are going through a transformation. The sun represents yourself and how you show up in the world. And this element of this spiritual divine calling. And it's like it's all coming together to be this evolution where you, like you said, integrating all parts of yourself and moving into a version of yourself that is not only fated, but is at such a higher vibration, higher level way of being in the world. It is, you could have insight into certain gifts that you have acquired, like soul level spiritual gifts. And those can range in, that could be like a deepening of your intuition, or it could be that you have the gift of communicating with people in a way that helps them in some aspect, or healing capabilities, or it can show up in so many different ways. But there's so much purpose in this kind of energy and aligning with it and what you create out of it and how it also like evolves and creates you at the same time. So it's really, we're going to have this huge shakeup and it's all leading you to this higher level purpose energy that you have been waiting to kind of step into and evolve and become. So it's really kind of beautiful when we get to the end of this mess.
yes, exactly.
I mean, it doesn't matter what the cake looks like, right? It's still going to taste good.
Totally.
I love food references. That's the Taurus in me, I guess. Um,
Who doesn't like cake? So,
yeah, gotta, I mean, might as well eat cake, right?
exactly.
Um,
No, I feel like it is. It's interesting because you have these aspects and when you look at them individually, right, it can be a little bit scary and overwhelming. And then you kind of see this combination of them all, and it's like the sign that things are gonna be okay. There's gonna be a big shift, but it's gonna be way better for you at the end, and so I think we do just have to go with God, the universe, whatever you wanna call it, however you connect with source, and really just know that, do what really feels right to you in your heart and your soul, and making sure that you're making your choices, that really connect to you and that you're being true to yourself during this time. I think things are going to force you down a path, or they're gonna just show you and you're gonna know, which way you need to go, and so there's not gonna be necessarily something that you are going to miss. I feel like it's gonna be pretty obvious for you which way you want to go. It's just whether or not, the universe is dragging you down the path and forcing you to come along, or you're just happily kind of, going down there, going through, going where you're supposed to be going kinda thing, like, where you're going. So if you, have change come up in your life, that's probably the biggest thing, is just to let it happen, to roll with it, not be overly stressed about it. Know that you're being led down a path that you need to go. So
Mhm.
don't resist.
Yes. Yes, because all of this instability is meant, there's meaning behind it, and it's meant to um, get you to a better place and a higher level understanding of yourself and what you're capable of. And what you really probably ultimately came here to do. I think so many people are starting to kind of move past the typical trajectory of what we consider, be having a successful life, and really starting to lean into what feels right and good for them. And that's opening up a lot of new opportunities and directions for people, which is really amazing. And people are becoming so much more than they thought possible, which is even better because that just raises the collective vibration, which we so desperately need at this
Exactly.
time. um, Gone down some crazy rabbit holes with that lately. We're not going to get into that. But, if you want to shoot me a message, I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more. Um, but yeah, it was just, as you were talking about that, it kind of reminded me of a quote, something along the lines, and I always butcher and massacre these, but I'll give you the gist. But it's like we're all climbing up a mountain, and we can either complain or we can sing as we go along. And I've just decided it's much easier to sing. So you can look at all of this upheaval and just think that your life is falling apart, or you can look at it as an opportunity and an adventure to see where it's going to lead you. Either way, you have to do the walk. So uh, that you can't help. You can't prevent what's coming.
No,
So
there's too many things, pieces that kind of come together in cycles that are starting and like in the middle of right now. That I just think it's unavoidable change, and really pay attention to that energy. I feel like Mercury is a big player, as far as, like, things we're seeing, and it's interesting because we kind of have jumped back and forth with talking about Mercury and all these different players, and then there was one that I noted, which was Mercury square Uranus, and this is the 2nd square that's happening, in a grouping of 3 for that one, and the first one was July 21st, and that was when we saw Biden actually step down, and so I want you to kind of I'm gonna give you this political example, and I'm not going into politics about it or anything like that. I want you to take it and kind of see if something similar is playing out in your life, right? So we have an example of somebody who is leaving and opening the door for a different person to come in. There's change, there's a changing of guard in a way. It's somebody who's recognized that they needed to step down, or that's just part of a transition process. So that was that first piece that happened on the 22nd, and then we are having the, next one happening, and that one is actually on the full moon, and it's interesting because we're seeing the Democratic convention right at that time, and I guess we'll see how it plays out there, but that can kind of give you a tangible example of how you can interpret, like, that energy and see how it's being applied in your life. and coming forward. So
Mhm.
take that as you will, if it helps you anyway. It's
It's
just
always
interesting.
fun to look at the cycles and the patterns
Yeah,
and how certain planets influence each other and bring certain energies together. So there's a reason why people studied astrology and put these things together, and why recognizing the pattern still rings true. So it's not like we're predicting the future, we're just recognizing the patterns that have happened before.
exactly.
So
Exactly. And so it take this information and find the patterns in your life, because then you can one, it'll provide some easy transition. Like you can be a little bit more aware of what's going on and how it's affecting your life. And so you don't feel that shock as things transition and change. And that's really what we're hoping that you do, is just be more aware of, what these cycles are bringing in your life, so you can apply it to your world, to influence if you want to change, if you want to manifest certain things in your life. That's really important, is just being aware. And we don't want to be stuck in a cycle that you don't want to be stuck in. We talk a lot about how the brain works here, and that our brain has a tendency to repeat cycles, and it can be bad cycles, right? Because our brain wants to go down the same path it's been down before. So if we had a learned experience when we were younger and it wasn't a good one, you're going to see that pattern repeated through your life, because your brain tells you you should go down this path again, because not that it wasn't bad, it just knows that path. And so to the brain, it's like, this is the best path for you. And so being aware of how these cycles really come into play in your life is key to breaking them, changing them, and so you can kind of move forward to where you want to go. That's my spiel.
yeah, so big moon.
It
So get ready.
is.
Yeah, put on your seatbelt.
Mhm. I agree.
Invite your friends over for cake.
Yeah. Oh, cake
Take
sounds
anything
great.
with a grain of salt.
That sounds wonderful.
um, yeah, but if you enjoy this, like, subscribe. You can follow on Wild Reawakening on Facebook and Bohemian Tarot Girl. And yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for being here.
Yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.